I landed the job at the subway station through sheer luck or misfortune, depending on how you look at it. After months of scraping by, finding a gig that paid above minimum wage felt like hitting the jackpot, even if it was in the most forlorn, godforsaken transit hub I'd ever seen. The Forsyth stop, an underground subway station wedged beneath the murky confluence of two forgotten city districts, had more in common with a bunker than anywhere you'd catch a train. The first oddity was the interview process, conducted in a cramped manager's office that smelled aggressively of bleach, as if they were warding off more than just dirt. The man who interviewed me, Mr. Holloway, had a manner as sterile as the office. He adjusted his glasses and launched into an unnaturally laminated set of guidelines, rather than asking any typical interview questions. When I mentioned algorithms, my previous part-time stint involved working with social media analytics. His eyes glazed over slightly, then sharpened when I said I was used to night shifts and odd hours. He seemed unnervingly pleased with that, scribbling down notes that looked too rushed to be legible. Then came the rules. 7 in total, each one more peculiar than the last. What struck me first was the absence of normal rules, nothing about customer service or ticket handling, which was all standard fare for subway station work. Instead, 1. Never open the control room doors between 2:15 a.m. and 2:45 am*. No explanation provided, just a thick underline. 2. Ignore any voices calling from the closed sections, even if they know your full name and date of birth *. He said it in a tone that suggested this was common sense, like advising someone to wear a raincoat in a downpour. 3. If you find personal belongings left behind, do not touch them with bare skin *. He handed me thick gloves as he said this, which somehow didn't feel like standard lost and found protocol. I signed the employment contract not because I was comfortable, but because the desperation of empty pockets outweighs the heft of unsettled nerves. My first shift started on a suffocating Tuesday night, with the hum of flickering fluorescents and the intermittent clack of distant trains echoing through the cavernous tunnels. It was busier than I expected. Commuters, looking much like myself, tired and just trying to get by, drifted like ghosts, none making eye contact, all moving with a hurry that suggested they wanted to escape more than just the city's late hours. That night passed uneventfully until exactly 2:15 a.m. That's when the air turned heavy, sticky like right before a storm. I glanced at Mr. Holloway's first rule rung in my head. Curiosity gnawed at me as I observed the control room's shut door. It was a plain, unremarkable piece of metal, but for those 30 minutes, it felt as ominous as a gate to the underworld. And then voices, not loud but clear, as if someone was having a conversation on the other side of the door, 2 people, maybe more, talking in hushed, fervent whispers. It was impossible to make out words, but the cadence was alarming, too sharp, the way people talk when they're plotting or hiding. Glancing at my watch, it was 2:43 a.m. Almost time. The moment the second hand completed the last sweep past the 12, marking 2:45, the weight in the air lifted abruptly, like a freed breath. I spent the rest of the shift eyeing every shadow and flinching at every train screech, more jumpy than I'd like to admit. When my replacement, Keith, arrived in the morning, his nonchalance was almost offensive. "Rough night?" he asked, inspecting his nails as if they were more interesting than any potential underground horror. "Something like that," I muttered, deciding not to unburden my apprehensions on him. Who would believe it anyway? As I clocked out, the sense of relief was palpable, until I found a woman's scarf on the exit stairs. It was silk, a vintage pattern of maroon and gold, and as I remembered Rule 3, I stared at it, lying there innocuous, yet somehow menacing as all hell. Why did it feel like a trap? I left the scarf untouched, nodding in my stomach growing, and walked briskly into the tepid dawn. The tepid dawn did little to shake the chill from my bones. Every step I took away from that scarlet silk noose on the stairwell seemed to echo back at me as a chiding whisper, a reminder that the simple act of working at the Veterans Archive was suffused with rules and superstitions I could not fully grasp. I didn't just work with shadows, I was drowning in their depths. The walk home was longer than usual, or it felt that way at least. My pace quickened with each unfamiliar sound. The rustling of early morning creatures in the brush beside the path, usually a comforting sign of daybreak, now sounded suspicious, ominous even. The weight of unseen eyes was palpable, and I kept flicking glances over my shoulder, half expecting to see that scarf fluttering behind me Lee. A flag of war. Arriving home, I slammed the door harder than intended, the sound a grim punctuation to my escalating fear. My apartment, usually a small haven of haphazard book stacks and unwashed coffee cups, now seemed stifling, its walls leaning in precariously close. As I slumped against the door, my breath came in labored puffs, steaming slightly in the chill of my poorly heated entryway. I had just about calmed my racing heart when I noticed it. A faint, almost imperceptible scent lingering in the air, faint, yet undeniably there. The same scent that had clung to the scarf, a mix of lavender and something metallic, like blood. My stomach churned. This couldn't be happening. Rule 3, never bring anything home from the archive. It was drummed into every new recruit's head from day one. An innocuous paperclip, a stray photograph, it didn't matter. Anything could be a carrier for what I had never really believed. Ghosts, curses. It seemed ludicrous until standing there, the air around me thick with a perfume that had no right to be. Desperate for distraction, I moved mechanically toward the kitchen. Coffee. I needed something real, tangible. The familiar act of grinding the beans, the clatter of the spoon against my favorite chipped mug, these anchored me to the moment, away from the creeping dread. But as water boiled, my eyes were drawn helplessly to my reflection in the window above the sink, an oblique image distorted by the poor lighting and my own paranoia. There was a movement just on the edge of my peripheral vision. Reflexively, I turned, but there was nothing. Breath caught, I told myself it was just the settling of an old building, branches against the window. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being not alone. The coffee forgotten, I edged back towards the living room, driven by some masochistic need to confront my fears, to prove them baseless. But then my foot caught on something. A soft, unmistakable fabric pooled around my ankle. Panic seized me as I looked down, heart sinking, mind recoiling. The scarf, maroon and gold, sprawled right there on my floor as though it had been waiting for me all along. How? I hadn't touched it, I hadn't brought it in. My mind raced, circling back to every moment since I'd left the archives. Had someone followed me? Was this some sick joke played by a coworker? No answers came, only the whirling of a tempest of thoughts that blotted out reason. I stooped, hovering just inches from the fabric, fear mingling with an irrational urge to pick it up, to throw it out, burn it, anything to get rid of it. But Rule 3 echoed ominously, contact, any contact was a transgression. My hands recoiled as though the scarf was a venomous snake. Instead, I backed away, every hair on my body standing on end. The rest of the day passed in a haze of stifled panic and looming shadows. Every creak of my apartment seemed a sinister whisper. Every breeze through slightly ajar windows, a chilly finger down my spine. Night fell too quickly. My usual disdain for the melodramatic fears of darkness felt ironic now as I lay in bed, sleepless, watching the play of moonlight across my ceiling. And then it started, a soft, almost mournful wail that seemed as much a product of the wind as it was eerily reminiscent of a lament. Outside, or maybe inside, it was impossible to tell. Each note was like a needle to my fraying nerves. I couldn't tell when I finally slipped into fitful slumber, but when I did, dreams swirled chaotically. Shadows danced at the periphery of my vision, always just beyond clear sight, whispering secrets in a cacophony of voices. And through it all, the scarf, the maroon and gold blur, a constant presence, binding, suffocating. Waking was a relief, until I realized the wailing had not been a dream. It was softer now, a murmur accompanying the false comfort of dawn's light spilling into my room. The scarf lay on my dresser, innocuous yet sinister as all hell. Shivering, I knew, whatever rules I thought governable were merely suggestions here, and I was far from alone. With the morning's wan light filtering through the blinds, every shadow seemed a sentinel, every silence a threat waiting to unfold. As the light grew stronger, the semblance of safety it brought felt more like a cruel joke. The walls of my apartment, once my sanctuary, now pressed down like the weight of a crypt. I was aware of the abject quietness, a kind of hostile stillness that seemed charged with anticipation, waiting for me to make the next move. My gaze drifted to the window, to the narrow space between the blinds where the morning dribbled in. My eyes caught a flicker, a subtle distortion of the light as if something had moved swiftly past. I froze, heart stuttering, peering into the faded glow of dawn, trying to discern if it was just my imagination. The more I stared, the more I felt the burning urge to peek through the blinds, to confirm it was nothing. Yet, every fiber of my being screamed to stay away from the window. The internal debate was cut short by a soft, deliberate creak from the hallway outside my door. The sound was out of place, a sharp contrast to the muteness that pervaded the morning so far. My breath caught in my throat as my head snapped towards the door. The sound wasn't just a random noise. It was intentional, measured, the kind made by something or someone trying to be silent but not quite succeeding. I crept towards it, every step a silent plea for quiet, my hands trembling noticeably. Holding my breath, I pressed my ear against the cool surface of the door. There was a shuffle, so faint it could have been a whisper of the wind, but there was no wind inside these walls. Perhaps I should have called out, demanded to know who was there, but fear lodged itself in my throat, thick and unyielding. Instead, I merely listened, straining to hear more over the drumming of my own pulse in my ears. Minutes, or maybe a lifetime, passed, and then, as if the intruder sensed my vigilance, all fell silent again. The tension didn't ease, it tightened, congealing into a dread that clung to my skin. I retreated to the kitchen, my back to the wall, eyes fixed on the door. I needed a weapon, something to defend myself, but as my eyes scanned the room, all they found were the mundane relics of my everyday life, utensils, plates, a toaster. In desperation, I grabbed a large kitchen knife, its blade catching the dim light as I clutched it, not reassured by its weight, but panicked by my need for it. That's when the power went out. Darkness swallowed the room whole, as immediate as a blink. The blackout plunged my tiny apartment into an abyss, wrapping me in a velvet cloak of near-total blackness. The timing couldn't have been worse, or more terrifying. My heart thrummed painfully against my ribs, each beat screaming a cacophony of fear. The knife seemed pointless now, a small and pathetic defense against whatever lurked just beyond my sight. A shuffle again, closer this time. It was outside my door, surely, but it was no longer a tempting stealth. Was it emboldened by the darkness or confident that I was trapped, too stifled by fear to act? Straining my eyes in the darkness, I groped for the phone in my pocket. The screen lit up, a small island of light in a sea of pitch black. I dialed 911, pressing the phone to my ear, and whispered my situation with urgent haste. The operator's voice was a thin thread of calm, a promise of help on the way. But would help come in time? I could hear it now, a soft scraping like the slow peel of dead skin, progressing along the length of my door. I knew, with soul-deep certainty, that it was marking its territory, or worse, biding its time. I backed into the farthest corner of the kitchen, squeezing myself between the cold refrigerator and the hard edge of the counter, clutching the knife like a talisman. The scraping stopped abruptly, replaced by a muffled thumping that grew in strength, in fervor, as if heralding something inevitable, something dreadful. My breath came in short, sharp gasps, my body primed for a flight I couldn't take. And then, as sudden as the blackout, the sound ceased. Silence reigned, cruel and thick, punctuated only by my ragged breathing. In the quagmire of shadows, a soft, sickly sweet whisper crawled across the floor, feathering against my skin, chilling my spine. "Found you." The words were a caress, a violation that paralyzed me with unspeakable dread. The words came from the shadows of my own living room, spoken in a voice that twisted the air, ethereal yet crude. My eyes darted around, struggling to make sense of the darkness that had, so quickly, become a tangible threat. The curtains blew gently in the nocturnal breeze, a mocking dance of normalcy against the backdrop of my escalating fear. I commanded my limbs to move, to flee from the spectral voice, but they betrayed me, rooted to the spot as if the very floor had claimed them. The air grew dense, suffocating, as if anticipating the scream that I fought to keep within. Just as the silence began to hum with pressure, another whisper caressed the nape of my neck. "You know why I'm here." I spun around, my heart rioting against my ribcage, but there was nothing, only the oppressive darkness staring back at me. Could it be a trick of the mind, a mere echo of my own spiraling thoughts? I turned to switch on the lamp beside the sofa, hand shaking uncontrollably. The light sputtered to life, dimly illuminating the room, and for a moment I allowed myself a shallow breath of relief. But it was short-lived. In the corner of the room, the darkness seemed to pulse, to breathe. I blinked, trying to clear the veil of fear from my vision. Yet it remained, a darkness so deep and consuming that it seemed a void was opening within it. I stared, unblinking, as it began to take a form, a human silhouette that lacked any feature, any humanity, just an abyss. The words again, now a soft, menacing growl. "Do not turn away." My instincts screamed to run, but my fascination, a horrific curiosity, nailed me to the floor. The figure moved, or did it merely shift within the shadows? Closer, a smoky tendril of darkness reaching out as if to touch. I stepped back instinctively, my back hitting the cold wall. There was nowhere left to go. "My eyes," it whispered, and a chill ran down my spine. "Look into my eyes." I knew I shouldn't, but where else could I look? The ghastly figure was all-consuming before me. Slowly, painfully slow, I raised my gaze to where a face should be, and for a fleeting moment I saw them, eyes not voids but pools of something painfully familiar, sorrowful even. They held me, not with force, but with an unbearable plea. The air shifted again, the whisper now a desperate, echoing cry in my ears. "Why did you forget?" it pleaded. A pang of some lost memory tugged at my heart, a memory of laughter and tears mingled together, now soured by this nightmarish encounter. How could I answer what I did not understand? As I stuttered a response, a sound interrupted, sharp and close, a clattering from the kitchen. My heart leapt. Another reality snapped into place, grounding me back from the edge of madness. Was there someone else here, a more tangible intruder? I turned my head just enough to listen, and in that moment the pressure lifted. I spun back. The figure was gone. The room settled into its usual mundane shadows. Had it been there at all? My breath was heavy, my body drenched in a cold sweat, but my mind buzzed with adrenaline-driven clarity. I moved, almost against my will, toward the kitchen, each step a battle between the urge to flee and the need to know. The kitchen was in disarray, a chair overturned, the window open with the night breeze mocking me anew. Everything was too real, too physical. Had something come in? Or, worse, had something been let out? The fear wasn't over, it had evolved. A deep, unsettling sensation gnarled within me as I stood alone among the ruin of a normal evening. Who or what had spoken? What did it want with me? But as I pondered, a part of me already knew that the night would bring no answers, only deeper shades of terror.